Good morning. Welcome everyone to the 46th David L. Underwood Memorial Lecture Award Program. I am Sharon North, last year's Underwood Honoree and a member of this year's Underwood Selection Committee. It is my pleasure to start off today's program. Please allow me to first thank my fellow committee members, Carol Hake, 43rd Underwood Honoree, and Steve Allen, 44th Underwood Honoree, who worked with me in the selection of this year's outstanding Underwood Award recipient, LaRhonda Wilson, an associate professor of sociology. Surprising LaRhonda with the news of her selection was one of the highlights of my past year. Also, allow me to thank each of the following important team members whose work contributed to today's program: Marie McCool, Bryant T. Williamson, Erin Linder, Shantana Stewart, Dr. Paul Higdon, Shonda Walker, Janice Nesserchew, and Dr. Elizabeth Perkins. It is also my pleasure to recognize the lovely Underwood family members, Ms. Annabelle and her daughter Kathy, who are joining us today in celebrating LaRhonda via the college's YouTube channel. I would like also for us to recognize the former Underwood recipients in the audience today. Please stand to be recognized. We also have elected officials in attendance today. If you could please stand. And district leadership, if you could please stand as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's program. Being recognized by this award is truly an honor, and the annual lecture is the highlight of opening week. The 46 recipients of the David L. Underwood Memorial Lecture Award all possess a deep love of learning, a profound connection to this campus community, and a place in the heart of each of the students they have served. David L. Underwood joined the Florissant Valley faculty in 1963 as an associate professor of English. He served as chair of Communications Humanities Division and later associate dean of instruction. He was appointed dean of instruction in 1967 and served until his untimely death in 1975. David L. Underwood was known for his love of education. He was deeply concerned with the welfare of students and staff alike. His dedication went beyond office hours, and he tirelessly gave of his time and talents to further the educational mission at Florissant Valley. Using Dean Underwood as an example, criteria adopted by the committee in 1975 for selection of an Underwood Award recipient include the following. The award recipient must have a strong record of achievement, of excellence in instruction or instruction-related activities. The award recipient must have a record of evidence that shows a genuine contribution to the field of education and a humanistic concern for students, faculty, staff, and all persons in education. LaRhonda possesses this dedication and commitment and brings so much more to the legacy started by Dean Underwood. So, on to today's program. Dr. Paul Higdon has graced this program for many years with his musical performances. In selecting the pieces for each Underwood performance, Paul reflects on the character and spirit of the recipient. So I cannot wait to see what he has selected for LaRhonda. Dr. Higdon will now perform Sergei Prokofiev's Sonata No. 3 in A minor.
Dr. Higgins. That was an outstanding set. Let's give Paul a round of applause for his excellent performance. A moving selection of music just for our 46th Underwood Memorial Lecture recipient. Good morning, everyone. I'm Steve Allen, supervisor of the Engineering Technology Center and the 44th David L. Underwood Memorial Lecture Award recipient. At this time, I would like to introduce our 46th Underwood Memorial Lecture recipient, Ms. LaRhonda Wilson. LaRhonda joined our team here at Florissant Valley 20 years ago after being hired by Margie Hahn. At the Florissant Valley campus, LaRhonda has served as the lead faculty for the Sociology, the Anthropology, and the Criminal Justice and Psychology programs. LaRhonda has also served as the program coordinator for the Campus Service Learning Program. Currently, she's been asked to head up the Center for Teaching and Learning on our campus. As I think we all know, how can you not know if you've been to any of our department-wide opening week meetings? Associate Professor Wilson is a strong proponent of service learning and has connected students to important issues ranging from environmental activities, reentry populations, services for children and families, and government accountability. These activities enhance classroom learning experiences by incorporating volunteer efforts in our students' local communities. In my mind, and many others, LaRhonda has been the biggest cheerleader for service learning on our campus. As noted during my reveal clues earlier this spring, both LaRhonda and her father graduated from the same university, Lincoln University. Her formal education includes a bachelor's in sociology and a master's in sociology and criminal justice. LaRhonda is a member of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority, the Lincoln University Alumni Association, the Missouri Sociological Association, and the American Sociological Association. She is a long-term supporter of the Ferguson Youth Initiative, which empowers teens from Ferguson and surrounding communities to become productive, positive, and contributing members of the community. In addition, she is constantly representing St. Louis Community College and her programs through lectures and in publications, including recent activities often on campus, such as the Spectrum of Activism with the Missouri Sociological Association and Lincoln University, and the Service Assembly Restorative Practices discussion at the Social Justice and Education Conference with Webster University. Some fun facts about LaRhonda are, she has lived in rural parts of both Illinois and Missouri. She was born with blue eyes and has more than one tattoo. The first time she rode a dirt bike, she jumped a ditch. And being a motorcycle rider, I thought that was neat. And I asked her, what was the deal on that? And she said, well, my dad was the kind of dad that thought we really needed to have some basic skills, change a tire, change the oil, and even ride a motorcycle. So one day I got to ride a motorcycle, and there was this ditch in front of me, and I had to jump it. And I actually crashed, and the biggest thing I was worried about was getting all dirty. So she's also jumped out of a plane just for fun. In college, LaRhonda was on the homecoming court more than once. She's been on TV, and she's co-hosted a radio show. Did you also know that LaRhonda is musically trained on more than one instrument, has dated a hip-hop artist, and she has a studio recorded song? Finally, she's been to the White House, and because John Lewis noticed her child during a march, they got a chance to walk together with him during that march. Quoting from one of LaRhonda's supporters, LaRhonda is a natural leader and has worked tirelessly across disciplines to create learning experiences for our students, both in and out of the classroom. Some of her most recent influential programming events are the Drawing Ferguson Together event, which was a vision of peace, a 2-day social justice conference and community gathering that brought together our students, our community, and North County residents. LaRhonda has also spearheaded an annual recruiting event with Ferguson Florissant community. This is a collaborative event across the campus that involves faculty, our students, and student clubs to engage them in the importance of higher learning. Her framework for this event has been adopted by multiple campuses and district areas. In addition, LaRhonda routinely brings in special guests, including film directors, local political representatives, historical and current activists, to meet with our students. She also consistently brings in voter registration drives to encourage students to use their voice in many ways, including with the ballot. LaRhonda was also one of the original founders for Women's History Month in the district. She and Dean Nesser-Chu created the framework that is now used not only by Women's History Month in the district, but also for the African American Heritage Month. LaRhonda has been recognized on and off campus with many recent awards, including the Missouri Child Welfare Advocacy and Leadership Awards, the Citizens Unsung Hero from the Organization for Black Struggle, North County Incorporated's 30 in Their 30s Award, the St. Louis American Salute to Education, Excellence in Education, Iota Phi Lambda Sorority, Apple for the Teacher Award, and the Teaching Excellence Award from the League for Innovation. Please help me welcome our 46th David L. Underwood Memorial Lecturer recipient to the stage, Ms. LaRhonda Wilson.
Hey, get some water. T told me not to get emotional, so let me take a minute. It's hard not to get emotional when you're so humble. And it's hard to humble me. Each year, Paul Higdon captures our personality to a T. Can we recognize him again? He gives me chills each year. Thank you, Paul. Thank you to the Underwood family, past Underwood recipients. Your warmth and encouragement have been outstanding this summer, and I needed it. The dynamic Underwood committee, for whom without I wouldn't be standing before you today. The rock stars at the theater. I forgot every time I walked in this door that I was in St. Louis. They made me feel like I was in New York or LA. My social folks, Annie and MK, for keeping me focused and lighthearted. My esteemed colleagues, trustees, leadership, and administration, especially my dean, Janice Nesser-Chu, staff, my beautiful family, friends, relished representatives of the community, including leaders and elected officials, past and present. My warmest greetings and gratitude to each of you. There are a few people I have to shout out. I typically advise against this because of time. You can't shout out everyone, but there are a few people I have to lift. The monarch of my maternal family is with us today from California, Gwendolyn Shannon. She and my family there are joining us by stream. Since I'm mentioning her, I have to mention my Aunt Sheila watching from Kansas. I lost my mother as a young adult, but I've always had shoulders to lean on as I've been trying to find my way through life and motherhood. So I'm extremely grateful to them and so many others. Of course, some of you may know that Gwen is married to Dr. Henry Shannon, who is a past chancellor of this institution. I'm so proud that they're joining us. He's learning for the first time today that I've always felt obligated to perform over and beyond because I got a hell of a reputation to follow. Under his administration, our college ranked number 1 and number 3 in the nation among community colleges during his tenure. So it's not surprising that when he moved on to California, he showed Chaffey Community College the same swag and evolved that single campus institution into a multi-campus, and it now ranks number 1 in the nation among community colleges. Don't expect that from me, but I have to brag because this is my family. And they have pressed academic excellence since before I knew what it was. I am blessed to be reared by them, who understood because I was born an African American female in these United States of America, I would have to work twice as hard as white females and black males, and 4 times as hard as white males to get almost equal access. So they pushed and they pushed. There are several of my special invited guests who are here with us in our audience today. Will you please stand so we can acknowledge you? Don't be shy. Where's my baby? I know you're not shy. Thank you. It is also my humbling honor that Margie Hahn, Marcy McMurphy, and Cindy Shanks are all streaming in with us. These 3 women made up the Florissant Valley Sociology program when I began my journey here. I wouldn't be here today had it not been for Margie Hahn. I wouldn't understand how to connect love to academic pedagogy had it not been for Marcy McMurphy, and I would not have standardized my name to service learning had it not been for Cindy Shanks. All of these women mentored me in this field, and there's no way I can accept this honor today without extending honor to them. I'm grateful to all of my guests, those of you who are joining us virtually and in person. Each of you received an invitation from me because I love you and you represent high value in my life. My Flo Valley colleagues, those whom I've worked alongside and those I'll meet and work with someday, your presence is a staple to this event. It's an honor for me, Dean Underwood's legacy and family, and our students and this community. While researching Dean Underwood, I ran across some jewels I've heard in past lectures and some that were new to me. In my 16 years, I've accordingly been encouraged by Dean Underwood's character and dedication to education. His family and community, it's absolutely revealing how adored a husband and father he is when after 46 years, his loving family continued to join us for this event and previous announcements. The COVID pandemic and mandated restrictions are the only interrupters of their steadfast attendance. Additionally, their willingness to give up their time to assist with loving and humorous memories to each of us as we feverishly prepare for our most optimal presentations. Their support in our efforts to honor his legacy and encourage our staff to do what Dean Underwood inherently practiced year to year to motivate, guide, and spread kindness and compassion across this campus is soul-warming. I found a powerful and insightful quote that was written in the Forum, still our campus newspaper, because he imagined such a publication for our campus. This article was written by then Florissant Valley President Raymond Stith, contemplating Shakespeare while describing Dean Underwood. Always pointing to the truth in humorous ways, advising without dictating, leading to a place better for all, yet not seeming to be a leader. He was one of us, a student, a teacher, a custodian, a secretary. He touched us all in his short life. As I contemplated my message to you while researching Dean Underwood, John Lewis constantly came to mind for me. Perhaps not an obvious connection, but a meaningful one. The light bulb for me was reading over a peer review that Dean Underwood conducted over work critiquing the state of equity in education. You can imagine that this would raise my eyebrow. Dean Underwood's areas were English and communication, so he gave amazing strategies for the author, adding that he was accurate in his overall point to highlight the unequal access to education for all children and the overall results between groups of children afforded quality education and those who were not. Dean Underwood, of his own volition, took to public access network to extend his skills to our local population. And that is, of course, beyond his service in the Navy, public education as faculty at Beaumont High School, and at this community college. All of this screams leadership and activism to me. His life exemplified ethical behavior, kindness, and compassion, just like that of Congressman John Lewis. John Lewis's legacy may have been more aligned with how we traditionally identify with activism and leadership, but it's so important to help people who are not in those traditional roles identify with their own agency and how they too can get into good trouble by ethical behavior, kindness, and compassion. I hope I can outline that for you today. I am a proud Black woman because of my upbringing. Raised by a single Black woman, who was raised by a single Black woman, who was also raised by a single Black woman, you can imagine that these women were definitely teaching and preaching feminism and Black nationalism. I knew the words to lift every voice and sing the Black national anthem before the Pledge of Allegiance because I learned it at home before starting preschool. My mother told me it was what she sang at her school at the start of each day. She graduated from then La Beret, now Cardinal Ritter, a predominantly Black Catholic school in the city of St. Louis. These women were proud and strong, feminine and sassy. And yes, they sure did think they were cute. They took pride in their curves, hips, lips, thighs, and full breasts. They loved compliments and the opportunity to show off their attitudes and education. They realized that they had the audacity to have an opinion, so they hyperbolized them. So in part, this is my stock. Coupling that with my paternal family's footprint at Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri, a historically Black university, one of only two in our state, and where my parents met. Part of my family tradition has been from my earliest memory, Lincoln University's homecoming, which I don as a family reunion. And as I have with pride followed in my parents' footsteps and those of several of my father's siblings, it is an honor to carry their torch alongside all of my siblings and a host of cousins, Chairwoman Days, all of who are very proud Lincolnites. She knows why I shouted her out. LU. My father just recently told my siblings and I that he hopes his grandchildren also attend Lincoln University. My point for sharing these nuggets from my life is that from both sides of my family, I've been armed with the kind of pride that fortunately gives me the tools and confidence to be a proud Black woman. Because of their love for me and the value they instilled in me, I am able to call out and combat racism, sexism, classism, xenophobia, and even microaggressions without fear. I do realize that I'm able to do so because of my struggles and because of the struggles and sacrifices from so many people before me, whose sacrifices outweigh mine by times. While my fight may end in jail, harm, or even death, their sacrifices were guaranteed to. So I can. So I can go to school wherever I choose. So I can live wherever my resources allow me to. So I can vote. So I can run for office. So I can love and marry whomever I want to. So I can walk or drive to any part of town, any time of day or night. So I can raise a child without fear of them dying because they were born black or brown or female or transgender or non-binary. So I can raise my voice and get into good trouble and is noted as good trouble. I don't take any of this lightly. I was raised not to. I was raised to celebrate those before me who paved a way for me to exist. In my celebration, I too do. I do challenge. I do protest. I question. I do stand in solidarity and fight for justice so others can, even if it means getting into trouble. So thank you to Congressman John Lewis, to Dean David Underwood, and so many others, including some of our viewers here today. Thank you. I remember being asked the question as a young undergraduate student, why are you in college? And even as a young graduate, why did you go to college? My questions ranged from anticipated responses to confusion. To find a man and marry well? I didn't manage that one. Be on the homecoming court. Don't forget my Lincoln University homecoming tradition. The homecoming queen and her court always looked so elegant in the parade, and I did too. To pledge a sorority. Yep, Delta Sigma Theta, Sorority Incorporated, the Alpha Theta chapter, spring 1993. One of my line sisters is with us today, Dr. Gina Jeffries, one of the most boss administrators I know. To go to jail just like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Shout out to my fellow activists, especially my BFF, Montega Simmons. And finally, to gain enough knowledge and understanding to overthrow the government. No question how I found myself magnetized to all of the sociology courses. And when it was time to graduate, grad school was the logical choice because I hadn't quite figured out how to overthrow the government. Finally, after my father had enough of hearing my strategies to do so and no plans to work, he thrusted me into the workforce against my will. How was I going to overthrow the government and pay taxes? Obviously, I had to move on to plan B. Marxism would not be my ultimate claim to fame. I love sharing my story with our students. I want them to know that no matter your purpose or where you land, you can always obtain an education. No matter your graduating class rank, your ACT or SAT score, no matter your financial situation, your family structure, or level of support. It may be more difficult for some than others, but an education is attainable. Additionally, the community college student is a primary source to our community because they're showing our communities that it can be done. Our students are on public transportation. They have families. They have economic challenges. Some are food and housing insecure. Our students have been told they shouldn't go to college. Some of them believe their destinies will land them in jail. Some have come from jail and have criminal records. Although we have plenty of traditional students, Some who, by the time they graduate high school, will have 60 or more credit hours. We glean all of our students, yes, even those who have a 10-year path, as success stories. I'm proud of each of them. Our duty is to show them love, support, guidance, and a pathway to social and economic heights. Shout out to one of my closest friends. I call her Aunt Jen. She often tells our group of close friends, who we call the aunties, how she is a proud Florissant Valley alum, now making 6 figures and is very philanthropic. I, too, am a single mother raising a Black female. If you are wondering, in case you haven't met her, she, too, is proud, smart, talented, audacious, and sassy. Yep, she thinks she's cute too. It's not my goal, nor do I want her to be another single mother who raises children without a partner. But if she does, I'm sure she will do so with the same spirit in which I'm raising her as I have been raised. This, I contest, is imperative to her confidence and willingness to love. She often refers to her village. She rarely meets a stranger. She embodies the power of cultivating community. She feels loved. She appreciates the concept of community and what it's worth. She knows that we are loved and we're responsible for showing and sharing love widely and often, Sylvia. It's necessary. There are so many people who don't feel love or know how to love because it's hard to reconcile a lack of love. A former student asked me to write and recite a letter to Black men a few years back. When she finished here, she continued on to Webster University. She was making a documentary because she had a loved one to complete suicide. She told me that while she asked everyone else to write a letter to a specific Black male in their lives, my assignment was to address Black men in general because from spending a semester in my class, she knew I would write a letter encouraging love. She was right. Friends and esteemed colleagues, I know that we're at work and usually the topic of love is taboo. However, many of our students are lacking love. They need to feel it from somewhere. Please don't misunderstand my motives here. I'm talking about community and universal love, what the Greeks refer to as philia or agape love. Imagine being born into a country where people hate you just because you were born you. Institutions that relegate you to live and learn in certain areas and make it difficult for you to live and learn in more prosperous areas. Living in spaces where resources are sparse and predatory, and where being you can limit your life due to fear, discrimination, injustice, and outright hate. All just because you were born. I can imagine that some of you are thinking, but LaRhonda, you're talking a distant past. Unfortunately, I'm not. I'm talking about our current functioning today in St. Louis, more specifically in this area where our campus sits and who our campus serves. This is why I do. Because of those "so I can" statements I referenced earlier can still be manifested. We haven't completely made it there. Not for everyone, not yet. This has been a summer to remember, well, a year actually. We've seen police held accountable for murdering an unarmed Black man, George Floyd, which almost never happens. But we've also seen no criminal accountability for police killing a sleeping Black woman, Breonna Taylor, in her own home. And in that same incident, the cop who accidentally shot into her white neighbor's home, not harming anyone, just scaring them, was indicted. These and similar examples resonated with me while I watched those 4 brave officers testify before Congress regarding the January 6th insurrection. Private First Class Officer Harry Dunn and Sergeant Aquilino Gonell of the United States Capitol Police, and Michael Fanone and Daniel Hodges of the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. Scott, I've got such a crush on Harry Dunn. Ain't he cute? It still stings my soul that since August of 2014, during the outcries following the murder of Michael Brown Jr., right in our backyard, the proliferation of the Blue Lives Matter movement swept the nation. Yet today, Reverend Gray, it's literally taking an act of Congress to reconcile the terrorist attack on officers who were actually protecting our nation's Capitol building and democracy. It begs one to conclude that blue lives only matter when they are jeopardizing or questioning Black lives. I want us to take a few things away from this, so I'm going to break this down a bit. The Black Lives Matter movement is not solely in contrast to the Blue Lives Matter movement. The Black Lives Matter movement is in contrast to institutional racism and social structures allowing racist practices and biases to exist. However, the Blue Lives Matter movement did emerge in direct contrast to the Black Lives Matter movement. I do not believe by those who represent blue lives, but by those people who want to pander to those who represent blue lives and who disagree with changing systems to welcome more equitable access to Black lives and other minorities. I used to like men of a certain means, so I would pander to them by batting my pretty green eyes and adjusting my attire accordingly to get what I wanted from them. Friends, folks who want to keep minorities oppressed pander to systems that oppress them. A brief history lesson that recently people don't want us to teach. Our nation's first policing structure was overseers of slaves. The landowners owned the slaves, and most often, the overseers too. The landowners created a stratified system to make the overseers feel more empowered, treated them better, fed them better, housed them better, so they stayed loyal to the landowners. But understand, they knew they were property or indebted to the landowners, so their duties to police the slaves and protect the landowners were clear. Most of them were rewarded for the inhumane ways in which they carried out their duties, so the treatment of the slaves were increasingly barbaric. Although we are centuries from slavery, unfortunately, we are not far enough removed from historical influences that encourage behaviors today, primarily because we refuse to learn history accurately, discuss social behaviors, and critically observe societal constructs that create narratives to influence fear and discourse. I have to shout out my campus wife, Annie Wagner. I endearingly call her my campus wife because holding down the sociology program on our campus is like a marriage. Sociology has been historically challenged as a discipline. I guess because it's relatively new and seemingly easy. Now, I warn my students each semester actually, don't let that easy word get you caught up. Conceptualizing nuanced theories can be tricky because people may think they understand what they're hearing without taking a deep dive when we implore that it's paramount to take a deep dive, to gather a full and complete understanding of a sociological topic, theory, or sociological paradigm. Otherwise, there can be plenty of confusion and misunderstandings. Like in this scenario with my baby. My daughter calls Professor Annie Wagner Aunt Annie. When she was a little girl, she heard us talking sociologically about a race issue, as we often do. From that discussion, my child concluded that Aunt Annie did not like white people. As you can imagine, it was quite confusing for a little black girl that a white woman did not like white people. So she asked me why. I assured her that Aunt Annie likes white people and everyone else. But Aunt Annie does not accept or tolerate racism. I went on to educate my child by informing her that intolerance from an educator is sharing information, offering redirection, data, evidence, facts, and a pathway to solutions. Some learners, or even students, refuse to accept some social conditions as academic and would rather stay unwoke, which is hurtful to others. And this is frustrating to educators, especially passionate ones like Aunt Annie. So what you witnessed, little girl, I said to my daughter, was a white woman who is intolerant to other white people being tolerant to racism and accepting bias. So baby, I said to her, don't confuse Aunt Annie's love for humanity with disliking anyone. Laurie, I know a lot of misunderstood white people who are trying to love and getting into good trouble doing it. There have been many discussions around critical race theory lately. Please understand my enthusiasm about this. The world is talking sociology, finally. It ain't just math and reading and science. I know it's important, but honey, sociology is too. I absolutely love it. However, in general, I'm not confident that the full and complete understanding of critical race theory is being conceptualized. And from some of the discussions I've heard on podcasts, arguments I've seen on social media, and yes, even reports on the news have sometimes either been incomplete or incorrect. So as I ask of my students, I'm asking of you today to please be ambassadors and take what you learn into the community, at your kitchen tables, around the water coolers, so people can hear from you an easy and concise way to break down critical race theory and reasons why understanding the theory can help foster equity and inclusion. Critical race theory is a sociological perspective that helps us examine behaviors toward and among racial minorities in society, resulting from generational impacts of structural and institutional practices. Critical conflict theory is one of the three main sociological paradigms, a worldview, if you will. This one worldview, of which sociologists conceptualize how societies function, was theorized by Karl Marx. This, my friends, is one reason people may feel contrary to critical race theory, because it is a perspective of this paradigm. And Karl Marx is associated with both conflict theory and communism. While I don't agree anymore that a communist or even a socialist society is a better practice than democracy, I do agree with arguments that suggest the way we practice capitalism leads us to outlandish inequities. As Max Weber, another sociological founder, warned us in the 1800s. Theoretically, capitalism sounds awesome. It's free enterprise. But the way we practice it in our country leads to extreme gaps in wealth, gaps in political power, health, gaps in housing, quality of life, education, and more. In a nutshell, this is how Karl Marx helps us understand critical conflict theory as an uneven distribution of power and resources between the bourgeoisie, who he identifies as the ownership class, and the proletariat, the working class. Sociologists have used the same concept to frame race, the uneven distribution of power and resources among the races. Please understand that the meaning of race is to stratify groups in a hierarchy in the first place. So it stands to reason that we need meaningful discussions about humanity as it relates to race and why we still uphold such practices. Now, I realize, and most of you do too, that we are not often taught truth and reality. Therefore, it does stand to reason that many may not know that racializing people is an intentional act to stratify people in a hierarchy. Societies all over the world have justified racializing people, historically and current day, by socially constructing groups of people. This means framing an intentional, most often made up or hyperbolized narrative about targeted groups of people, socially constructing their characteristics, behaviors, ideas, attitudes, even the way we look. You may see the way I look, but you're conditioned to believe that I look different. These made-up social constructs make it easier for power structures in societies to practice a range of institutional inequalities and racism, like genocide or unfair housing and gentrification. W.E.B. Du Bois, another sociological founder, worked diligently to reimagine how Black people were seen and recognized in the United States for this very reason. In part, this is how we have come to identify the Black, or commonly called the Harlem Renaissance period. It worked for a while, Dr. Collins. Black people were seen as literary and artistic rather than objects and cattle because he changed the social narrative. Critical race theory seems to be a hot topic in our region. So let's look at examples in St. Louis County and compare what it's like to live here being Black and being white. But please don't mistake this sample to mean that critical race theory is limited to the oppression of just Black people. I'm simply using these two groups in my illustration today. In St. Louis County, 78% of whites own homes, while 49% of Blacks own homes. 82% of whites own interest-earning assets at financial institutions, while 58% of Blacks do. Also noteworthy, many predatory banking practices target Blacks and other minorities at alarming rates of about 70%, which create more debt and decreases the ability for savings and other interest-earning potential at financial institutions and makes Blacks' credit scores vulnerable. Like this A1 liquor store that sits right next to our campus. All of my students know that I hate this establishment. I just learned yesterday they do too. The mere nerve of the liquor store offering predatory banking in their business, targeting our students, is just disrespectful. The median annual household income for Blacks is $31,200 compared to an annual income of 61,200 for white households. The unemployment level for blacks in St. Louis labor force, this is almost 3 times higher for whites, which, for example, puts St. Louis 8th highest in this category in the nation among the 50 highest ranking cities for the racial disparities, resulting in economic disparities. While playing around on the interactive tool for economic disparities last year in 2019, published by the Economic Policy Institute, I learned that St. Louis County is the most unequal county in the entire state of Missouri, with the top 1% making almost 30 times everyone else. So the average income of the top 1% of St. Louis County residents is $1.7 million a year, while the bottom 99 average was $60,000. I said that wrong. This stat is from 2019. I looked it up in 2020. But the 2020 census reports a marginal decrease of $57,000 a year. And while this is a significant gap for everyone, the gap widens considerably more between the 1% earners in St. Louis County and black St. Louis County residents, most who live in County Districts 1 and 4, this North County corridor. A more compelling note is that areas such as Spanish Lake and Wellston are centers are concentrated in poverty and overwhelmingly impacted by factors that give rise to income disparities and low academic expectations. This can lead to the formation of negative social exchanges and identities and behaviors like broken speech patterns, lower cognitive skills. It's hard to smile and offer pleasantries when your money ain't right and you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel because these predatory banking businesses keep hustling you. We also witness discriminatory housing practices at alarming rates. Crime and targeted criminal justice injustices. Lack of access to healthy foods. Discriminatory hiring practices. Transportation issues. Labor markets that do not sustain living wages. And did I mention predatory banking businesses flooding these communities, like this A1 liquor store next to our campus? More prominent on everyone's mind today, reveal that these environmental and social conditions have boosted the percentages of COVID cases in these vulnerable communities. For the sake of us all, reports a huge disparity in the St. Louis region in infant mortality, which is more than 3 times higher among blacks here than among whites. That's been since 2012. Nationally, the ratio is just over twice as high among blacks than whites. Black children make up 25% of the population in St. Louis County, and 35% of them are living in poverty. Among the 75% of white children living in St. Louis County, 6.4 of them live in poverty. Preschool enrollment made an impressive climb for black children, getting an early childhood education. In 2015, only 3% of black children across the nation were enrolled in early childhood education settings where there was an academic curriculum. Today, black males make up 18% and black females make up 19%. However, among those black males in early childhood education settings, 41% of them and 53% of black females enrolled have been suspended. Thus, we begin the school to prison pipeline as early as their first experiences in school. Consequently, there are 60% more black male detainees in the St. Louis County Justice Center than any other demographic for low-level felonies. Low-level felonies are typically nonviolent or non-threatening to the general population. Additionally, regardless of the charge, black males are typically charged an average of $50,000 bonds with no reduction for high-level felonies, regardless of what the felony is, which is not the same practice for any other demographic, including black women. What does this mean? My interpretation is that our courts are either more afraid of black men or there's some other bias that encourages this standardized practice. It's easy to read out reports and just hear and see numbers. But as sociologists, we bridge a face to our quantitative work in populations, so it's personal. We cannot help to question if we're honoring the opportunities to serve the people on the margins and challenge the power structures by questioning the oppression and injustices that disrupt those narratives that encourage the stratification of groups of human beings, not numbers. Aaron Huey, a well-known photographer and activist for the Lakota Nation on Pine Ridge, shared in a TED Talk in his closing remarks after showing his remarkable pictures and alarming statistics, some of which include 90% of the Lakota live below the poverty line. The school dropout rate is 70%. Life expectancy for Lakota men is between 46 and 48 years old, Over 50% of the Lakota live with diabetes, and suicide rates increase annually among each age group. He closes by allowing the viewers to understand their issues cannot be dismissed as their problems that have been self-inflicted. Yet, we must realize that racism, institutional and structural practices are co-culprits. He quotes, "The last chapter in any successful genocide is the one in which the oppressors can remove their hands and say, 'My God, what are these people doing to themselves? They're killing each other. They're killing themselves while we watch them die.' This is how we spin the narrative. This is how we dodge putting the onuses on social structures and the way in which we practice institutionally. This is how we twist ethical behavior. This is how we justify voter suppression, Jennifer. This is how we put people in jail for pushing an ethical agenda or calling them radical, socialists, or justify compassion fatigue. This is how we blame the oppressed for their oppression and the hurtful conditions they live in and with, and absolve them as normal behaviors. Behaviors like black-on-black crime, not voting, getting vaccinated, not getting vaccinated, ill family values, and poor academic performance, to name a few. How do we mitigate and resolve? Well, one way is having meaningful and critical discussions around how we practice race. No need for blame and finger pointing, but educating and telling the truth. Our history lessons should be real and not myths. You don't have to call it critical race theory. Call it the truth. Call it compassion. Call it kindness, ethical behavior. And yes, sometimes it can lead to getting into good trouble. It may mean speaking out of order or against your own interests. Yes, we still have rules that support racism, classism, sexism, and xenophobia. So breaking those rules or pushing up against them is ethical. I know I just stepped on some toes, but getting into good trouble is what I do. I'm doing it out of love, though. I like to give examples to make my points clear. About 7 years ago, we had a college employee, Danielle Lusk, who learned of so many of our students who were experiencing food insecurities. She asked if we could start a food pantry, and she was told no. So she reached out to Dr. Howard Rosenthal, a few other faculty, students, staff, and community leaders to problem solve, and eventually those discussions morphed into her vision. And today, we have a food pantry supported by the college. She could have given up and told students, we can't help. It's not college policy. Rather, she worked to change policy because changing policy was the ethical thing to do. It was the compassionate thing to do. And it started from kindness. Friends, it's unethical to allow people to live on the margins of our country and region just because our local institutions have grown comfortable treating poor people and minorities despairingly. Perhaps it's not done on purpose today, but as a legacy from the way things have always been done, is still unethical. It's unethical to kick kids off of health care. It's unethical to be fine with racial profiling and deciding that drug use is a medical condition for white folks, but criminal for black folks. It's unethical to allow school districts in our service population to go without basic needs for their students, while school districts in more affluent areas have state-of-the-art equipment. The 1954's ruling of Brown versus Board of Education wasn't about black people wanting their children to go to school with white children. It was about black people wanting equal access to quality education for their children. Although the court ruling favored desegregation, there are compromise wins still today in predominantly black communities in 2021. I want to highlight a couple more acts of compassion and kindness that have made differences for our students. The kind of differences that we may not be able to measure, but we can absolutely lead them from dropping out to commencement. May even be the result of good trouble. Now, I'm willing to get into good trouble when I know the outcome is beneficial to a group of individuals who wouldn't otherwise gain. So to that end, I've witnessed good trouble resulting in great outcomes and the college supporting them. As shared in the earlier example with the food pantry. In our academic environment, we cannot do business as usual. Cookie cutters don't work, including textbooks and online instruction. Education and learning is fluid, and we have to be too. Some non-traditional methods may have to be used to gain successful outcomes, and it's okay. We have an employee. I want to be undescriptive, although if you're paying attention, some of you will know who I'm talking about. This person is brilliant. This person is not faculty, but this person is absolutely an educator. This person is a walking almanac, and the discussions are rich and thought-provoking, combative but critical. This person challenges the status quo and can easily be invisible in plain sight. I often tell this person that students should have the opportunity to chat and benefit from the rich discussions that are generated from them. Contrarily, they remind me that it's not permitted, at least not at length. Their job is their job, and it's not to teach or mentor, although they would jump at the chance to if given permission. Let me go on record saying in front of everyone, that rule sucks. Anyone working at an institution of higher learning, especially at a community college, should have permission to mentor and promote academic success no matter their position. Some of our students are more comfortable talking to the groundskeepers than their professors. Not because we as faculty don't make ourselves available, accessible, or approachable, but because for some of our students, it's about familiarity. Familiarity is sometimes status, race, gender, language. I've seen an employee tell a student to pull up his pants after a faculty member did, and the student did it when the non-faculty employee made the request. No disrespect to faculty, but the student obviously felt a kinship to the non-faculty employee that led to cooperation. And on several occasions, I've witnessed students reporting to Ms. Shirley in our front office when they've done well on a test or a class project because she makes them feel proud to be here. I love the story of Steve Bay taking a phone call from the Missouri Women's Correctional Facility from an inmate who was looking for general admissions information. He could have easily transferred the call or not even taken it, but he did take the call and encouraged that woman to enroll as soon as she was released. She was encouraged by that call, and when she tells her story, she says that Professor Bay's office was her first stop after her release, even before home. If you've been under a rock and you don't know Chantel Fisher, I'm telling her story, one of our many success stories, one of UMSL's success stories, because she left here going there on a full scholarship and proceeded on to Wash U and is now among our elite adjunct faculty. Friends, my point is, if students can feel love, caring, kindness, support, and yes, even discipline from the whole campus, they are feeling the proverbial community. I feel like we're at a turning point in our country for so many different reasons. But for us specifically, we have a community college professor in the White House. And she gets it, Wesley. I had a whole lot more to say about Jill Biden, but I had to cut something because my lecture was getting too long. But just know that she's advocating for our students, and that's exciting. It's good news that it's possible community college will be even more affordable to more people. And a more educated population, Tracy, is a more civil population, a more prosperous population, a healthier population, Erica, a population who can generate wealth and a stable economy for the country. While folks are looking to the executive branch in Congress for equity in our country, Alderman Hinkle, I'm looking to FLOTUS. In closing, I'm going to get in a little bit of trouble. Good trouble, because I'm going to go to church on y'all. I'm an inclusive person by nature, so I hope you can catch my vibe regardless of your faith or belief. My faith of choice is Christianity, and I practice using the Bible. This quote is from the book of Ephesians, chapter 4, verses 31 and 32. I found a sermon on YouTube that was based on this text, and it was titled Radical Kindness. The scripture reads, "Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you." These words, compassion, kindness, the idea of being ethical, is generally a byproduct of our skill sets. We don't put much intentional focus on practicing these skills, Ruby. We may not even identify them as skills, but rather choices. We assume these are characteristics that are taught at home. However, when a closer examination is given to these skills in our society, we discipline and ridicule people for not practicing these skills. We are, as citizens, hurt and imposed upon by those who don't practice these skills. And we are left with good vibes, and for some, increased social capital because of people who do practice these skills. And very importantly, Terry, children absolutely need these skills shown to them over and over and over daily. The absence of these skills shown to children is critical and proves to be detrimental to their daily functioning through their stages of development across their lifespan. So my personal request of you is to extend these skills daily. Ethical behavior, compassion, and kindness to as many people as possible, especially our youth. This may mean that you get into good trouble, just like me. That you don't excuse intolerance. That you fight predatory banking. That you love unconditionally. That you vote and fight against voter suppression. That you question even when it's uncomfortable. Feed the hungry. House the unhoused. Demand justice for the oppressed. Do join me in good trouble. I love you for being you. Thank you each for being with me in this physical and virtual space today.